All right, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. This is going to be a good one. This is called Knighted. My name's Shane.
I'm Paul.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get the show started.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So, Knighted is by a company called AWA Upshot, and it's one of the branch offs, independents that was started by some folks from Marvel and DC and the rest. And so they brought some of those elements into some of their stories. This one is a little bit of a unique take on the superhero genre. So, Gregg Hurwitz is the writer, and of course, you might know him from some Batman stories, Moon Knight, things like that. The artist was Mark Texeira, who's done Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and some of the other things. It was colored by Brian Reber, who has done X-Men, Spider-Man, Deadpool. So these are all pretty well-established creators. And as a result, the story, I thought, and the art was really interesting. But basically, it's about just a mass vigilante. You've got a hero who suddenly, well, I don't want to ruin it, but has some very, very unfortunate luck. And suddenly, an everyday guy, just this bureaucrat, just this hapless little nerdy guy, is all of a sudden thrust into the role of being the hero. So now, of course, picture all the chaos that happens when that happens, right? But I thought it was kind of a fun book to read, but that's sort of that's a quick summary of the creators and the book itself. So we'll go ahead and get into the discussion.
Yeah. What'd you think, Mike?
It's definitely a fun read. I enjoyed the book as far as there's, as we've talked many times, it's hard coming up with some original stories. A lot of times it might be some common stories and just different twists and things like that. And certainly you could see some of that, where the little guy, trying to come out on top or make a name for himself, or sometimes the woe is me and stuff like that. And so there was some of that, where you kind of feel, and it's funny because I think all of us as readers, right, depending upon where we're at in life as far as what we have going on around us, sometimes it hits home. Some of these situations certainly can hit home, and so sometimes it speaks to you a little bit more. And there's definitely some interesting twists in the story with this book. Again, we never try to spoil anything or ruin it if you haven't picked it up yet. So to me, it was definitely entertaining to see some of the events that occurred. Again, the support team for this book, very talented people. I enjoyed the book. I thought it was a fun read. I enjoyed it enough. I would definitely continue, reading the story, reading about the characters, kind of seeing where it goes next. So,
What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was reading this book and the character, the knight. I was like, man, this character is like reminds me of like a Batman, or like kind of this vigilante. And it's funny because Gregg Hurwitz, he wrote some Batman, he wrote Moon Knight, like these vigilante characters. So it was cool to see him take that and then do this twist on it. And I was like, that I laughed out loud a couple of times when you're learning more about the knight, or you meet his version of Alfred and stuff. And again, I don't want to give stuff away, but that character was funny too. And it was good. I really liked it. It was I've had my favorite issues. I like to be blown out of the water. This one wasn't like it didn't blow me out of the water, but it was a great setup for what I think will be a fun premise, and something to play with. There's a lot of ground they can now, or a lot of places they can go with it and have a lot of fun with it. So I think as a setup for a series, this was a really great issue number one. I'm excited to see where it goes. The art was solid. And we'll give our ratings later. I feel like the art was solid. It wasn't like like some of the other books we've reviewed where we're just like, whoa, I want to buy this as a something I'm going to hang up. But it was like a good solid artwork that helped move the story along. I thought they did a good job with putting in the action and keeping you guessing, you know, a little bit as far as like what was happening, you know, in some scenes, again, without trying to give anything away. There's some things happening. They kept you turning the page to figure out. So I feel like the art helped drive that story as well. So yeah, it was a really solid read, and I think it's going to be fun to see where they take Bob and the knight character. Yeah. Good old Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I love the name of the you know, the group that's out there, sort of the you know, you know, the gang or whatever you want to call them, the grinders. I thought that was kind of funny. You know, it just,
Oh yeah.
you know, they just use these different elements. Like you said, Ben, what they did was they took like known elements, things that we like, and they said, okay, how screwy can we make this? How bombastic and ridiculous can we make this? And it, like, how tough on Bob can we make it? You know, and it even like shows his childhood a little bit and things. So I thought like the use of all that was really good. And I mean, these guys are established story writers, artists, colorists, inkers, things like that. So that's probably why there's sort of a, you know, kind of a successful flow through the book. But it's with a company that's really out of nowhere, you know, using some of these artists. So I think our goal in bringing this out is to say, look, these creators have taken it upon themselves to step outside their comfort zone. We're not going to draw Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. We're going to draw characters you've never ever seen before and make you care. And I think, at least for this first issue, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this this book is probably the easiest entry point for somebody who only reads DC and Marvel to venture off into the indie world, because it's such familiar material. They're definitely putting a twist on it. You know, when we get into our review section, you know, I'll have share my thoughts about the story and that element. But the one thing I will say is that we've mentioned this in some other books, is this idea of world building. And within this first episode, you know, we establish, you know, what's going on with these people with powers, that, you know, what this world looks like, who this character is, what his situation is. We understand all of that. And this idea that it ends with a real punch. I mean, we know it's like this whole idea of a cliffhanger. We're definitely ending the story on, all right, now I got to know what happens to this guy next. So all of that stuff is really, really good. You know, I enjoyed the art style. It definitely felt very comic booky. You know, great use of the angles on the panels and things like that. And I also like the fact that as a character, he's not just this polished person. I mean, he's definitely got he's got some issues, and he's kind of an everyman, and you know, things don't always go great for him, and as evidenced by the way the story opens up and what happens in that initial like thing. It's like, oof, you know, and I think,
come on, Bob, really?
Yeah, right. And I think that, and I think that endears the character to you initially, like, you kind of like, oh, that poor son of a bitch, like.
Yeah. poor sad sack SOB.
Yeah, he definitely gets kicked around a lot by pretty much everybody that he meets.
I was like, how's this guy going to be the hero?
Yeah. Why are you telling me about this guy that just got dumped by his girlfriend, and is like, everybody wants to like push him down and take his milk money, you know? It's like, what?
Yeah. But I did find it interesting, because you were talking about the world building too. I loved how Gregg took the knight character, and in just like 2 pages helped you figure out what the guy's really like.
Yeah.
It took just like I don't even think away.
Yeah.
He took a couple of pages, and you're like, oh, okay. So you didn't need a bunch of exposition to get there, and they picked a really good scenario for it. So yeah, it was.
So like maybe he's
really
not
good.
the guy to be the hero, right? Like, ooh, yeah, he doesn't. Yeah. But on the upside, I mean, he's got you know, Morgan Freeman as a butler. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I'm like, dude, it's Lucius Fox, you know? I'm like, ooh.
Yes, exactly.
Making his way around, but
yeah, I mean, that's the one thing about this particular story. I feel like it's if you ever seen anybody make artwork where they cut out like pages from magazines and then glue it together on a single page and make, what do they call that, collage? Like I feel like
ransom
this,
notes.
yeah, like this story is definitely like clippings from other things and like pasting it together in a new and interesting way. Like you could see like the original, the knight person. There's almost some elements of the boys, just a little bit of like the the rough, raw, kind of dirtier side of that, and then the elements of obviously the knighted has, we know where that is very I don't want to say it, but I mean, you can see it from the title. I mean, it's knighted. I mean, it's yeah, so that's interesting, but at the same time, you could almost make the argument a little derivative. But I think that they brought enough new stuff to it to keep me engaged and made the character unique enough that I want to see where it continues to go.
Yeah.
So,
and with the villains too, I liked how at first you saw them as like one note villains, but then like toward the end of the book, you start to they add more depth to it, and I thought it was really interesting to see this battle between people who are hooking themselves up with robot cybernetics and stuff, and how they hate people who got these powers. And it's like, well, we built ourselves to be powerful, they just got it, we worked on it, they did. And the building up of that, and then the bigger villain who shows up and all that, I thought that was it was a cool, neat take on that, like why they were being villains, like why they were doing those things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also thought it was kind of interesting, the idea that that these everyday people get these weird powers, and some of them are pretty pathetic. And like and I thought that was, I wonder if they were like making a commentary about like some of, like with Marvel, you've got 1,000 mutants, and not all of them are going to have really cool powers that are like super useful. And so like I felt like that was almost like a dig, like, hey, look, I made this little thing appear. Yeah, cool. We're gonna beat the crap out of you because
thanks, Jubilee.
Totally useless. Yeah.
It's like,
I was thinking Dazzler,
right?
but
it's like, yeah, well, we're gonna make you appear in the hospital now.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And Shane, I think one thing you said was spot on. We've been looking at a lot of different kind of books, and a lot of them have veered off the traditional path. So I think your point to, if someone is looking to maybe branch out from the big two and sort of make that leap into something a little more independent, or start to move that way, I think this is a pretty good kind of a, this is a good transition. This sort of weans you off the the superhero, the traditional superhero, where they're always right no matter what they do. That there's more questions about this than answers, and they actually for especially anyone that's viewing this right now, if there's ever like a commentary or a letters page at the end, I always endorse reading that kind of stuff. A lot of folks took a lot of time to maybe put their thoughts on page and all that, and Gregg Hurwitz at the end does like a little 2-page letter, and he talks about that kind of stuff, how, hey, I've done this, but I some of the stories with heroes I've really wanted to do, you can't do, right? You don't have 100% creative license. And that's why some of these creators create a company like AWA Upshot and Zenoscope and Vault and all the other ones we've talked about, because they want to take a character and they want that sandbox open. And this character, you get to open a sandbox. I mean, for this guy, the sandbox exploded and there's sand and everything. So it's going to be pretty interesting. So that's what I like about it, is it is kind of, I mean, we could read anything and sort of get out of it what we wanted to, but you can tell that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, look, yeah, this is a Batman, Moon Knight-like character, but we get to do something that we could not do with Bruce Wayne, right? Yeah, DC decides what we do with Bruce Wayne. The creators here get to decide what to do with the character. So I think that autonomy really makes it interesting, because you're like, they could go anywhere. They could do whatever they want. They could make this a complete disaster, and it'd be hilarious to read and entertaining for us, because there's no consequences, right? I don't have to explain it. I don't have to reboot Knighted #1 because somebody screwed it off and went off the path.
you make it a really great point. These artists and writers that you want to reach the pinnacle and you want to write for Marvel and DC and do a Batman or a Spider-Man. But then when you get to there, I think that they
You're
may
constrained
come to
a little.
they come to the realization of, oh, I really can't do anything, because I think sometimes they try and push that limit, like they experiment with like the Ben Reilly, and they're like, oh, that really upset a whole bunch of people. There's a lot more ramifications for when you try and push the limits at that level. And so at this indie level is where you can really experiment more, like you said, and have an open sandbox that you can do some things that you absolutely can't do at those higher levels. This is where you see some more unique storytelling, and kind of piece other things together. And coming back to my analogy of cutting out magazines and pasting them together to create this story, I feel like that's okay, because he's done that now, and now we can go beyond that as the next issues of the book come out to see what you've done after that initial idea.
That's what I like about these books that we're looking at, is because I'm not gonna rack my brain going, oh, I know where the story's going. I don't want that. I want just whatever comes, and I'm happy with that. When I read some of the other titles I read, I'm looking for certain elements. I want to see that success, or I want to see that story move in a specific way. And whatever happens, obviously. But, just real quick, like we were talking about the transition and this and that, if you guys are familiar with Dan Slott, that wrote Spider-Man for a good amount of years, they made Peter Parker successful at one point, and he had Parker Industries, right? And he was successful. He was kind of a screw up as a CEO, but he surrounded himself with really great people. And there was a core group of fans that really kind of just completely rebelled against that whole idea. And I thought, why? You would think this guy that was a genius at 15 and created a webbing that would last for an hour would have some ability to become a successful, entrepreneur at some point, as long as he got the funding or whatever. And it just, and people rebelled against that idea. And I thought, you just can't. Peter can't have nice things just for 5 minutes. I was okay with Parker Industries. I had no problem with that. They did it with Stark Industries. Stark Industries got taken away from Tony. And then he morphed into he did other things. Pete could do that too. That's what I like about this. We don't know what Bob is all about or where he's going to end up, but I'm cool with it, whatever they do, because there's no consequences.
It's funny that, we're sitting here talking about it, and my mind that's what I love doing these conversations and talking about this, because my brain starts to like continue to move, after it can only do so much when I'm sitting there by myself reading. So you guys help activate my brain to continue to work. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, we've established what this character is in this first book. And I could almost see, like, it could go, maybe by episode 5, it goes real dark, like, because we're crapping all over this dude. Like, he could just finally go and snap and be like, I'm tired of being everybody. And
he could become as bad as the first guy that had the costume on.
Yes.
And that's what I think. That's what you have to be cautious with, the top tier characters. But with this guy, no limits, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Do whatever
I
you
love
want.
that, because that's why I was saying I want to like keep checking out what's going to happen, because will the power that he gets corrupt him? This guy who seems like to be like the Boy Scout, type, like always do everything, right by the book and all that. Is that going to corrupt him eventually? To, and it's so fun, because like you were saying, like if you're reading, I don't know, like well-established characters, Batman, all that kind of stuff, he dies off, and then you're gonna be like, oh, we'll see him again in a couple months, or
no consequences.
New 52 or whatever. Bring back a whole different version.
Flashpoint Part 2.
Yeah. Flashier point. Yeah. So this is fun, because getting into any of these kind of indie books is fun, because you don't they can just be killing off your favorite character right away, and you're like, oh crap, and they're not coming back. So I'm really curious to see where they take this, because is Bob gonna be the only knighted character? Like, you know what I mean? Like, the door is open. So
wait till he runs into somebody who really means business, right? I mean, he's just Bob, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he runs into somebody really on the other side of the coin, boy, he could be in for it, which would be fun.
I think you make a really great point, Ben, about this idea that independent books, you get real consequences for things where you don't necessarily get that in a Marvel and a DC. Like an example of that would be Walking Dead, where they just killed off characters and they didn't come back. Whereas in the Marvel and DC world, you kill off a character, you already know he's going to come back. They had a clone of him or whatever, whatever the thing is. Whereas in these more indie books, there's like real consequences for things. They make decisions, and it's a hard decision. So yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with the rest of this Knighted for sure.
Big M, you're on. We've held you down long enough.
Yeah.
Are we? Were you ready for ratings, or you want more feedback?
No. I mean, you just any other thoughts? I mean, we've been kind of throwing a lot of stuff against the wall, but I mean, it just I think this was the book that, like I said, if you look at the cover, it says "Heroes Never Die" with "Never" crossed out. I was like, okay, and that was like right on, man. Bring it. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, very cool. Again, I think it's wide open, as you all stated already, and it's almost like I think Ben had a couple of good points, and well, again, all of you I think mentioned it at some point where you talk about having a blank canvas. Where does it go? You talked about if readers want to get away from the big two and kind of branch off, this might be. To me, it's funny because I think of like the old Cracked magazine or the Mad magazine where they would do little panels about Superman or Spider-Man or Batman. They put the little humorous twist to it, and it's almost like that for me sometimes, where you're like, oh, this could be really funny. Again, maybe it goes dark, maybe there's a twist and then another twist and then another. So it's like, yeah, that blank canvas where you have the empowerment to make those crazy choices and twists and surprises, and you're like, wow, this totally took a whole different turn than what I expected. So that's fun. That's entertainment, right?
Good. I this was to be honest, of the books we selected, this was the one of the ones that I probably had the most apprehension about. I thought you guys might go, oh, look at he's trying to stick to the costume crusader genre. I'm like, but there's just enough of a twist. I think it was just satire enough that you guys would get it. I appreciate you guys getting the nuance, because I obviously there's a lot out there to pick from, but we want to give these folks a chance. Even if they're established creators, the story, the company, the story, a lot of that is new. They want to tell. They want to put their own slant on it. And this is really this is what they've been wanting to tell. This is the story they've wanted to tell probably for a few years. So it's nice to kind of see them get a chance to throw that out there. So that's why we definitely want to give them a chance.
When you sent the cover, Paul, the covers to, I saw the cover, but I saw it's the "never" was crossed out. Heroes never die. Never. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta read this.
Yeah, you just. Yep. I'm not trying not to steer you guys wrong.
Yeah, I loved The Boys. I love Invincible. I love those, from the bigger writer stuff. I love those kind of stories that take the superhero genre and play with it and get outside the box that so many of the bigger brand names are in. Like they're kind of stuck in those boxes because, as you guys pointed out, the fans will sometimes they'll get up in arms if you introduce a new character, or if somebody changes even slightly, like Parker Industries. Oh no, can't have nice things, Peter. But with this guy, or with what they're doing here, and in all these indie books, they can just go for it and get brutal. So it's funny because that's why I brought up Invincible too, because I'm curious to see. We talk about him going dark. It's like, are we going to have like some fun adventures with, Bob for a while? Then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, so I'm really curious to see where they take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you make a great point. I mean, that, not only, the big two held by the constraints of the fans, but it's also just the intellectual property in and of itself. And the idea that, they want to continue to sell, t-shirts and toys and video games and everything else. So they're under a huge amount of constraint. And, to bring it back what you said, Paul, this, even though these are established artists, and this is a chance for us to probably see them be themselves for the first time under the constraints of what they had to work,
What does every creator want? Creative freedom.
freedom. Exactly.
And this is what this gives them, and that's what we're promoting, right? It's not the individual writer or artist, it's the overall package and the creative freedom that they have under a company that was created by folks wanting to express that. And that's why we don't want folks to pass on this. We'd like them to give it a chance. Even if you recognize the artwork, you recognize the writer's name, regardless, right? They now have a freedom that they don't have or may not have as much of, right? Because there's no long-term ramifications. So
yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, if they had come out and did a complete, knockoff or something that we've already seen, then right, there would be nothing to recommend here, and nothing for us even to have a discussion about, because what did you do? But the fact that they're showing who they are as artists, I think, is really exciting and interesting. So, well, cool. Well, let's get down to some reviews. What did everybody think?
Okay. So for story, I'm gonna go 4 because I'm really excited to see where it's gonna go. And there was some fun twists and turns, great world building, character building, all of that within that first issue. And it seemed kind of when we talked about these guys being established writers and stuff, so they know what they're doing, and it seemed really effortless in the world building. So I would go with 4 with that, because, and not a full 5 or anything, just because I feel like there's you've seen, huh?
You're
I'm
squirming.
squirming now. doing my squirm dance over they we've seen our bobs and stuff like that, but I still feel like I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. The artwork, I'm going to give a 3. It was solid. It wasn't bad. It's just I wasn't blown away with it like it has been in some of the other books. So as we've talked about before to the viewers, like 3 is like the baseline, is like good. That's good. So 3 was good. So I'm gonna give it an overall, I'm gonna split the difference, 3.5 on that. Well, you know what? No, I'm changing my mind. Sorry, guys. Can you change the graphic at the bottom? Let's change it up, and it's a 4 now. Yeah, 4. Because I really want people. I want people to check it out, because I really think it's going to be a good series, and I would love for them to get some support, so they'll keep pushing it forward, because I'm curious to see where it's going to go.
Nice. All right, Mike.
4 for the story. As we've mentioned, a lot of creativity, a lot of open space, a lot of different directions it could go. I love that. I love that concept. And so for art, I think we talk about, from time to time, we talk about books that distract us in some way, shape, or form. And Ben mentioned it. It's solid artwork. It does not distract from the story. It helps. Everything seems to be kind of in unison and working together. So again, I love that when you don't have these little nuances that just totally kind of wreck your flow of taking it all in. So I'm doing a 3.5 on the artwork. Just again, because it didn't blow me away, was definitely above, in my opinion, above average. These are great teams of writers and artists, and so again, this is not their first rodeo, so you kind of expect that at a certain level and a certain degree of expertise. And so overall, I think I'm going to stick with a 3.5, just because I don't know where it's going to go yet. You've definitely got me hooked, and I want to see where it's going to go, and then we'll see what happens with future issues. So
nice. What do you think, Paul?
So, like Ben and Mike have both said, established creators, right? This is not their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. However, I thought they showed some real brass ones by stepping out and doing a couple things we haven't seen, right? I've really taken a first really good step. Some edgy stuff, right? Contemporary stuff. So in terms of story, I'll give it a 4.5 because I liked I liked the sort of up to the ledge they took. Now, will they go all the way? Like Mike said, let's see where they go. Maybe they don't. Maybe they back off the ledge. We'll see, right? But 4.5 for story, I'll give them that extra half just for running up to the ledge. For art, I'm going to give it a 4 because I thought it was solid. It wasn't, upper echelon, but still real solid, fit the story well. No confusion with characters, things like that, which is, we've talked about before. Don't pull me out of the story and don't make me re-recognize characters 3 pages later, right? So I thought they did a great job with that. So overall, I'm gonna go with a 4.
Very nice. I am actually going to go probably 3.5 across the board. 3.5 for the story, 3.5 for art, 3.5 overall. And the reason I'm doing that is there's definitely some stuff in the story that is, we're still figuring out, because it's somewhat, there are definitely some things that I've already seen before, but I like that there's some unique twists on it, and I want to see where it's going to go. 3.5 is not like that's bad. It's above normal. Yeah, but I have to do that only because there's been some stuff that we've reviewed in the past that have just blown my mind as far as art and what people were doing really creatively. Yeah, I'm going to stick with 3.5 across the board for me on this one. It's definitely a solid 3.5. It could almost switch into 4 just because listening to you, Paul, I'm like, should I go 4? But I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna stay 3.5 across the board. So
don't be a dopey, be a doobie.
Yeah. I got to be me, Paul. I got
that's what you got to be.
I got to stick to myself. Yeah. So yeah, that was great. I appreciate it. Thanks you again, Paul. You always pick out these great books and helping us to bring these indie people to light. Even though these are established creators, this is a completely new story. Something that definitely people need to check out for sure. And make sure to kick that like button and subscribe. Keep bringing you new stuff all the time. Paul's out there hitting the comic shop every week, just looking for new stuff for us, and we're going to bring it to you. So we'll see you on the next one.